Now from Fox. Let's turn our attention right now to the high-profile case in New York City involving music mogul Sean Diddy Combs. Day number 4 of this trial. You can see a live picture right now at the courthouse as we await the exit of some supporters of Diddy. We've seen that several days, but plenty to get to in terms of different cross-examination of his ex-girlfriend Cassie on the stand today. We're going to be joined right now by Fox 5's reporter Lisa Evers outside of the courthouse. I know you spent time inside of that room learning details, witnessing the testimony from Cassie. What did we learn today? What were the big takeaways, Lisa?
Well, I think the big takeaway, Andy, was just like yesterday, we had a late afternoon bombshell being dropped by Cassie on that witness stand as she gave her testimony. She told the court that in 2012, Sean Diddy Combs had a drug overdose. Now, this was hours of testimony where she was being questioned by one of Diddy's defense attorneys about the use of drugs in their relationship, that it was part of this kind of party drug culture lifestyle. And it seems to be part of the defense's strategy to portray her relationship troubled with Sean, as a troubled one with Sean Combs, where they were both using drugs, which supposedly explains the erratic and some of the abusive behavior, according to the defense. But what she said was that they had turned to these painkillers. She had turned to them in particular after the physical and emotional after effects of these freak-offs, and that they'd be high for a couple of days and using IV vitamin drips in order to get back up so they could continue partying. And then on these drugs, and that both she and Combs had these drug addictions. But the idea, she claims that she drove him to a hospital in 2012 because he had OD'd, and that's the first that we're really hearing about anything like that, Andy. But part of the defense strategy to say, hey, were they the perfect couple? Not by a long shot. Was there a lot of abuse? Yes, Combs has admitted that, but it was domestic violence. There was a lot of drug use, but this was not sex trafficking. So they're trying to create that picture and portray that picture, Andy.
Yeah, it's very interesting because they're going through some of these text messages and graphic in nature because they met when Cassie was 19, Diddy was 37 years old. It's very interesting. Can you detail how their relationship started and how it changed over time? Because as any relationships do, especially over a decade plus, they change. But this one was very interesting. Can you detail that at all?
Well, it is, and you're right. I mean, she met him when she was 19. She said today she fell in love with him when she was 21. She was in Miami. He had maneuvered to bring her down there for an event where he was going to be, kissed her in a hotel, and then they went out. And then, believe it or not, while she's 21, these freak-offs started happening. So the relationship evolved, but it was on again, it was off again. They also detailed the relationship she had with Ryan Leslie, a producer and a musician, for about 3 years. He was 10 years her senior. That was right before she got involved with Combs. So there were a lot of relationships and what you might call, what some people call situationships, where they're on again, off again, and then it evolved. And then very soon, by the end of that first year, when she's now 22, she said that he basically took control of her entire life. That was a lot of that painful testimony from yesterday, where he controlled her money, he controlled where she lived, he controlled what she wore, he controlled what she did. Her music career, basically, which had looked promising, and at the beginning when she met him, was on the sideline, and everything was about these freak-offs. And Andy, we got an idea too of the number of them. You're talking about hundreds, she said, hundreds of these freak-offs. And then today with these text messages, you mentioned that. I think it's important to touch on that. A lot of these text messages had, "I love you, baby, I love you," going back and forth. But then the explicit ones were talking about, it was basically love and lust, and to show that she was not, that she actively wanted him. And I think that was a strategy there, because remember, what they're trying to do is sow some doubt in the minds of those jurors who, after that prosecution case, which was presented with surgical precision, step by step, milestone by milestone in their relationship, to sow some doubt in their mind about the fact that she was a victim, and to show that she was a willing participant in this. And a lot of talk today about this drug use, which was rampant. She was asked, would you consider Diddy a high-functioning drug addict? And she said yes, because, I mean, the other thing that's incredible is that while he's at the height of his career, his business, his basically building his empire at this point early on in those first 5 years of their relationship, doing all these drugs, all these freak-offs, and yet he's still running these multi-million-dollar businesses and becoming the billionaire that ended up on the Forbes billionaires list. So it was very fascinating, and at times the jury looked bored, though, because the defense was, after coming after the prosecution, which was basically like rapid fire by the script and everything planned out, there was a lot of lag time. Some of the jurors looked, as if they were getting a little bit bored with it, but we'll see where it's all going, and that's not quite clear yet. But we think it's definitely according to the defense's plan that they outlined early on in the pre-trial hearings, where they were going to insist domestic violence, not sex trafficking, and we'll see which side eventually the jury decides on. Andy?
Yeah, there is mounting evidence, and this is just really the beginning, the first week of it expected to be 8-week trial. Let's get into the text messages, because like you mentioned, those are so very interesting, and they pointed to one text from Cassie to Diddy that said, quote, "I'm always ready to freak off," relating to some of these sexual escapades there taking place between the two. And it also, Cassie appeared to be upset that they took some of these out of context. Do we see her get frustrated with some of the questioning during cross-examination?
Well, I think that the whole thing was, they were trying to show that these freak-offs, which, just to remind everybody, it involved her having sex with another man while Diddy watched. And then what they added to that today, what she said, she goes, yeah, and of course the text messages too were entered into evidence saying this, that after they would have these freak-offs where he's watching her have sex with other men, she says, oh, then we would make love. And I love those sessions. I don't know if you can hear me with everything here, but I love the way we make love after the FOs, which was after the freak-offs. So that was creating a very different picture of somebody who was essentially yesterday portrayed as a sex slave who had very little say in what was happening to her. Here it is, she's saying, yes, I love this. This was our way of doing it. Now, she explained that all she really wanted was a kind of a basic relationship with Combs, one-on-one, that type of a thing, and that clearly was not in the cards for them, and it was clearly not something that Combs had any interest in whatsoever being exclusive, because jealousy was another big theme that the defense had said they were going to show, and that was portrayed in some of those text messages too, Andy.
Yeah, that is a very good point. The jealousy point was something that I was going to bring up. Another point I want to ask you about is Cassie on the stand, as they had a kind of a deal going into this trial that she would be off the stand by Friday, that they wouldn't have to have her come back after the weekend. Do you think that is happening? Do you think it wraps up in terms of cross-examination, some rebuttal questions by tomorrow?
I think, Andy, we were waiting for the judge to actually have a ruling on that. Yep. And the court, the session today went a little bit longer, which we're taking. I came out here to do, to do my various hits. But I think the session went longer today. This judge, when he can, is keeping everything on track, watching the clock, keeping things moving forward. She is very, very pregnant by all accounts, 8.5 or even almost 9 months pregnant. I don't think they want to risk anything. It's been quite an ordeal for her emotionally. Her family was in court again, her husband, her mother, her brother, her lawyer, other supporters. And I think it's going to get nasty, but I think they want to have it wrapped up with her by the cross-examination tomorrow. And apparently there's some, I don't know if it's an actual hard and fast rule or if it is professional practice and standards. But whatever amount of time the defense, the prosecutors had with her, which was about 1.5 days of 2 days, the defense is allowed the same amount of time. So that would mean that they would not have any time past tomorrow if they get started, resume the cross-examination tomorrow morning. So I really do think, and from everything we're seeing now, that the cross-examination is going to wrap up by tomorrow. I don't know whether or not they can bring in another lawyer. The other thing, Andy, I want to point out is really interesting today on Combs' side. Luigi Mangione's attorney showed up in court to show support for Combs. Of course, she's married to Combs' lead attorney, Mark Agnifilo, Karen Friedman Agnifilo, but she was there, and Diddy looked happy to see her. So we'll see what happens tomorrow, who's going to continue with that cross-examination. But they're really, they didn't really have any, like, gotcha moments with Cassie in terms of in terms of catching her in inconsistency or anything like that. But we'll see what happens tomorrow. Andy?
All right. My last question before I let you go, Lisa, because this has been so very insightful into day 4 of this case. But as we watched during open statements, it's not only about what they say, but who says it in terms of the lawyer that presents some of this. And it was interesting to look at the cross-examination, as it was Anna Esteveo there cross-examining, asking questions, chit-chatting with Cassie, getting comfortable with her. How did you view that? What was your perspective on having her be the person to cross-examine Cassie?
Well, I think they definitely, it was clear to everybody, they definitely wanted a woman to do it. They definitely wanted a woman, a woman to approach her. And she was being very, I don't want to say laid back, because Anna, the defense lawyer, she was, of course, very, very involved. But in terms of the approach with her, it was much more conversational. But she was also, there were a lot of objections by the prosecution to the way she was asking questions. And then we learned also, too, from sources that early this morning, the defense had failed to meet the request. There was an April 27th deadline for them to supply the prosecution with all of the evidence that they would be presenting in court, like all of these text messages, and apparently that didn't happen. They missed that deadline. So yesterday the judge had ordered them to get them to the prosecutors as soon as possible, like basically ASAP. And then there was a dump of reportedly thousands of text messages, or a lot of information for prosecutors to go through at about 3 a.m. this morning. That's how close to the wire the defense is playing it. So that typically is not a good indicator of things that have been well thought out. But on the other hand, defense attorneys will say, we don't want to tip our hand with the prosecutors too much in advance. So that might have been what was behind all of that. But the fact of having a woman do the cross-examination was critical, because the last thing they wanted to do, Cassie is a tremendously sympathetic figure. Her courage, Andy, think about that. Just going up there and talking about these, like the lowest moments of her life, and admitting to, what she did, which is not anything any woman would really ever want people to know. And doing it in open court with the eyes of the world on her, that takes a lot of guts. And of course, the other bombshell from yesterday, we have to remind people, was the $20 million that she got as the settlement from Combs. She was asked another question, Andy, that was really, really important, that everybody in the court was kind of like going, whoa. Anna asked her, the attorney asked her, would you say that your lawsuit ruined Sean Combs? And then there was an objection, and then there was a rephrasing, and Cassie said, yes, it did, because it basically did. I mean, his empire, his reputation, everything is totally a 180 from what it was before that November 2023 lawsuit was filed, Andy.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Of course, Cassie mentioning that about it, but it's obviously a conversation about, is Diddy ruined Cassie's career, and now Cassie potentially ruined Diddy. So it's a very interesting argument being made there in court. And we just saw the support system for Sean Diddy Combs, his kids leaving the courthouse just moments ago. Lisa Evers, I appreciate your time, though. Great insight, as always. Day number 4 wrapping up there in New York City. We appreciate it.
All right. Thank you so much, Andy. Take care.
Thank you so much. All right, great conversation as always here on Live Now from Fox. That cross-examination of Cassie in this Diddy trial. I want to take you back out there one more time. As you can see, the courthouse, as we just saw the children for Sean Diddy Combs, some of them in the courtroom today. Of course, the twin girls, I believe, appeared today, similar with yesterday, with all the graphic nature of the evidence that was being presented. All right, let's slide away for a quick 2-minute break. We'll get you back out to more top headlines after this. All right, welcome back in here to Live Now from Fox. Let's quickly take you back out to New York City as Doug Wigder, the attorney for Cassie, answering questions after cross-examination today. Let's listen in live.
I'm not going to opine on what the jury is thinking, but I think that Cassie's doing a great job on cross-examination, very long cross-examination. Hopefully it ends tomorrow. And so she can be done by the end of the week and put this entire chapter of her life behind her. She's doing as best as she can. She's obviously, tired, as you would expect, but she's holding up great. I mean, it's a real tribute to her.
How do you feel like how they're flipping the script with the cross?
I don't think they're flipping any script. It just seems they're reconfirming the direct.
Do you feel like today made Diddy and everything that we saw in that video, you gave it an excuse for it?
I'm sorry?
Everything that we saw on the video, Intercontinental. Do you feel like today's testimony from Cassie gave an excuse when they kept talking about the withdrawal from the drug abuse, which she has spoken to?
No, I mean, look, I don't know that. I don't think there's a legal defense to this case based on his drug use. So I'm not really sure what that's all about.
Looked a little more excited today, though. Like they had a win today.
Oh, well, okay. Well, it's not really up to what Diddy's team thinks. It's not up to what I think. Actually, it's what the jury thinks. And
Did he feel any shame at all?
So
I don't know what he's thinking.
Cassie, I saw Cassie touching her back and stretching and drinking lots of water. Do you think that the stress could possibly induce her to go in sooner?
I'm not a doctor. I'm just a lawyer. I have no idea. I hope
Does she
not.
seem
That's for
okay
sure.
when
Watch
you were
yourselves.
speaking
There's a
to
car
her?
behind you.
She seems great to me. She seems great.
Any word on how her husband is currently feeling?
I mean, I said it yesterday. If you were in his shoes, I think, this is difficult for him to watch, but he's holding up great.
What about the whole Suge Knight thing? Her saying that Diddy and his friends went without her, and then they brought it back that she said she went with them. Can that be damning in a
I think that's just a minor point that unfortunately somebody got wrong when she was being interviewed. She didn't review those notes or anything like that. I think her testimony. The one thing about her testimony really is there's no credibility issues with her. The facts are the facts. She's telling them as they are, her truth. And they are what they are. This is not a typical cross-examination. There's no issues with her credibility. It's a testament to her.
Do you feel like they made her not as a young girl who didn't know what she was getting herself into, but someone who said okay to things? With that text message that showed her that saying it is what it is, and I'm okay with that. When they talked about Kim Porter and her being okay with not being able to spend holidays with his family, setting up that there was like a jealous situation that was happening. So I'm asking you talked about her credibility, right? Yeah. I feel like yesterday made her seem, we empathized with her yesterday. Today, we're seeing that there may have been almost like a motive to her anger, her upset, which resulted in the lawsuit and where we are today.
No, I mean, the facts are the facts, the text are the text.
With Kim.
The facts are the facts, the texts are the texts, and I think that the evidence will be clear as the case goes on and Cassie's testimony goes on, and we'll see what the jury does. I have to go. I'm sorry.
Have a great night. Do you think that they're proving this force fraud forward?
All right, just listening in there, that was Douglas Wigder, the attorney for Cassie Ventura, who was on the stand getting grilled during cross-examination, saying hopefully it ends tomorrow, that she is tired, but she's holding up great, saying there's no credibility issue in terms of what they're hearing from her, but plenty of more bombshell details around her relationship with Sean Diddy Combs inside of that courthouse. Of course, no cameras, so we're only getting it through transcript, through reporters, but the day number 4 wrapping up right now, and hopefully, potentially, Cassie will be off the stand by tomorrow. A live picture right now outside of the courthouse here on Live Now from Fox. All right, let's bring into the conversation, as we do almost every day about this, TMZ executive producer Michael Babcock. Michael, thank you so much for joining us here on Live Now from Fox, and lots to get into in terms of the text messages, how the defense is painting their relationship between Cassie and Diddy. What did you hear today, and what's the big takeaways for you?
Hey, Andy, thanks for having me back. Yeah, look, obviously, this is the third day that Cassie was on the stand. Now, the first 2 days were the prosecution, who obviously is trying to paint the picture that Diddy, using a number of different leverage methods, coerced her into doing these really horrible things that Cassie did not want to do. Well, the defense side of things, and today they were up, their job was to say, look, Cassie is an adult and she chose on her own free will to engage in some of this sexual activity. And they started the day, Andy, by going through some text messages that are obviously many, many years old now, but that showed or seemed to show a really loving relationship between Cassie and between Diddy. And it really painted the picture of two people who were in love. And I think obviously that was something that they were trying to show. Look, this is not a horrible, abusive relationship. This was a loving relationship. And again, perhaps they in the bedroom did things that other people might not, necessarily get down in their own lives, but that this was what they like to do. A little bit later, I think you really started to see themes of betrayal and of distrust in the relationship, and that Diddy admittedly was jealous over what Cassie might have been doing. Other celebrity. I know we had just, in fact, talked, I think, yesterday, Andy, about other celebrities and if other names were going to be brought into this. Well, yeah, we heard today about Kid Cudi and jealousy issues with Kid Cudi and Cassie being together and hooking up. We heard about Michael B. Jordan and Cassie possibly having a relationship that angered Diddy. So again, there was these themes of distrust and of cheating in the relationship that seemed to go both ways. And again, this is probably not the end of it. She is going to be back tomorrow, and hopefully that's it for Cassie. She does not want to have to come back next week and carry her testimony into a second week. But it's only day 4, and it's explosive. It really is.
Yeah, it really is. And the lawyer for Cassie is saying hopefully wraps up tomorrow, and hopefully she can really close this chapter on her life as we learn those details, the $20 million in this civil settlement that come soon after those bombshell details back a few years ago. I want to ask you, because as you guys do at TMZ, doing a great job covering all the celebrities, and when these two individuals met, when Sean Diddy Combs met with Cassie back in 2008, I believe, she was just 19, he was 37. Can you detail some of their relationship? Because the jealousy component comes into it, as she wanted to be in more of an exclusive relationship with Diddy. Can you take me through the timeline a little bit of their relationship and how public it was?
Yeah, I mean, I think like you said, Andy, I mean, first of all, she is a young person, like you just pointed out, a literal teenager at the time who was trying to make it in the industry. And you've got this guy in Diddy who had been around for decades already and was incredibly well established and very powerful in the industry. So there was a massive power dynamic between the two. And she tells the story of them celebrating her birthday and Diddy kissing her for the first time in a bathroom, and how she liked him and she was into him and she wanted to make him happy. And that goes into a lot of the things then that she ultimately said that she did for him, despite the fact that she had said he had been violent with her, that he had not just during, some sexual acts or in the bedroom, but had also just been violent with her because of jealousy and for other reasons. But she remained committed to him because she was in love with this person. And she also feared that he could ruin her career if she were to have broken up with him. And that was a real fear for her, she says. So it was violent the way she paints it from the very beginning, or near the very beginning, and it's remained violent through their relationship and through them breaking up in the mid 2010s. And to hear of the last act of their relationship, Andy, when she says that she broke up with Diddy at a restaurant, and they were having this closure, conversation where they were going to say goodbye to each other, and he ends up taking her back to her place, and she claims that he sexually assaults her there. So, I mean, almost from beginning to end, she said this relationship was rife with violence, with sexual violence, and again, it just really seems like a nightmare.
Yeah, that is a very good point. One thing that you mentioned there about ending their career, of course, Cassie was threatened or felt threatened that Diddy could end her career if she did come forward. She was asked on the stand a little bit of a reversal, the fact that her civil settlement, this trial, this case could end Diddy's career. Do you think that had any weight with the jury?
It's so hard to say. I don't think so. I think, if there's anything that has been perceived as a whole thus far in the prosecution's case, and we probably have 7, 8, 9 weeks left, so it's probably not even fair to say this at this point. But nonetheless, this is the conversation that you're hearing outside the courtroom. I think some people have said this is not an assault trial, and while the prosecution has certainly showed that Diddy was violent and domestic violence was rife in the relationship, have they shown that there were federal crimes committed when it comes to sex trafficking? And a lot of people have said that that part has been lacking so far. So I don't necessarily think, Andy, that the settlement or the civil lawsuit that Cassie brought last year, I don't know that that has a massive impact. I do think that there could be a situation where the jury says, look, not a good guy, not a good boyfriend, but not guilty of the charges that they've brought against him. That I could see. Again, the prosecution has likely 2 months here to fill in these gaps and to make their case. I think thus far, I'm not sure that they've exactly shown that he is guilty of sex trafficking and racketeering, which again is what he's charged with.
Yeah, we are a long way to go in this trial. Hopefully, Cassie is off the stand in terms of that tomorrow. Anything else that you're keeping an eye on? Anything else? Any questions that you have left?
No, I think one of the other important or, sort of shocking things to come out of today was Cassie saying that in 2010, that Diddy actually overdosed on opiates. She said they were hanging out in the LA area. They go to they have a freak off first in one of their hotel rooms, that they then go to some sort of sex club, and that Diddy then ultimately goes to the Playboy Mansion by himself. Cassie says that later on, Diddy became so sick that she had to take him to the hospital, and ultimately it's because he had actually OD'd on opiates. So these are things that we had obviously never heard of before, and sort of all just learning these things, and it's sort of coming out like a fire hose, Andy.
Yeah, that is very true. Obviously, the different freak-offs that we're learning about this graphic in nature, but also the drug aspect to this case is going to get a lot of headlines as well. All right, Michael Babcock, I appreciate your time here on Live Now from Fox. Great insight as well. I'm sure we'll talk to you maybe again tomorrow.
Anytime. Thanks for having me, Andy.
All right, take care. All right, great conversation there, as always, as it just wrapped up there in New York City. Day number 4 of the Sean Diddy Combs trial. Cassie on the stand. The lawyer, Douglas Wigder for Cassie Ventura, says they hope it ends tomorrow in terms for her, and they can close a chapter on this. But plenty of bombshell details coming out of New York City right now, out of this courtroom, as no cameras inside of it. So we're just gleaning information through some of these different details from reporters. I'm Andy Mack. We're back after this.